day it's the whole bunch's fault. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de Lille. Mr. Speaker, I know it is now the 25th of June, but I'm sorry I wasn't able to be in my riding for the Fête Nationale, and I would like to I hope that everyone had an excellent time. Now, getting back to the subject at hand, I have heard the debates of my honourable colleagues on the other side, and they repeat that the total stoppage of postal service harms Canadian economy and small and medium-sized businesses. Yes, this is true, but there's something you forgot to mention. The employees of Canada Post did not declare a general strike. They did not want to stop mail delivery. They decided to hold rotating strikes so that Canadians would still get their mail. It was the employer which decided on a lockout to put an end to mail delivery. And even more shocking is that this government is trying to blame the employees of Canada Post and the NDP just to justify their own policies. The employees want to return to work, and we know that Canada Post would never have declared a lockout without the agreement of the government. If the economy is so much affected by the stoppage of postal services, the government should not be blaming everybody about this except for themselves. The Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Agriculture yesterday said that millions of Canadians were suffering, and small and medium-sized businesses were suffering because of the lockout, and that they are their voters who voted them into power. But the postal workers also voted for us. They have families and children, and it is important that their rights, union rights and bargaining rights, be defended. We're not talking about a right which is found in a simple act or regulation, but a right which is set out in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and in the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Man. And this is a basic, fundamental right. Now, the employer is in a very strong position. So why is the government acting the way it is and throwing everything into a disequilibrium? Because this is not a free and democratic society if we don't have free bargaining rights. Now, we know that there are political prisoners in other countries denounced by Amnesty International. These countries don't respect basic rights. There are people who have fought for the rights of their people and their workers. For example, there is Mansour Ousanlou, who is president of the workers bus union in Tehran, who has defended the rights of workers and is now imprisoned and mistreated for this. In Canada, workers have the right to negotiate for better working conditions, for a better salary, for stable pensions, which will allow them to have a retirement, a suitable retirement. How can the government talk about freedom and democracy when it wants to use its majority to force workers back to work on lower salaries, and they are putting in legislation which would reduce salaries by $875 in 4 years. Their pensions would be less stable. Holidays would be reduced. Also sick leave and decreases in various social benefits. How can the government accept this sort of thing, to have people living in an unstable situation with lower salaries? How is this going to contribute to the economic recovery of the country? This is ridiculous. And indeed, this is very important, that there should be the right to bargain for better conditions. Canada Post is a crown corporation. It doesn't need to negotiate with its employees because the government is on its side. And that is why now, at this very point in time, negotiations have stopped. And this is why we are here today. We are the only solution for these workers. The government is not acting in good faith, offering less than what Canada Post offered its employees. Mr. Speaker, in my riding, Canada Post workers are mobilized in spite of the rain yesterday. They were picketing in front of a postal office in my riding. Not today, it's Saturday, and a great majority of drivers driving past these picketers were honking in their favor. And the government is trying to make people believe the opposite, but most Canadians, the majority of Canadians, know that the postal workers were involved in rotating strikes, and the lockout was imposed by the employer. Now, they are union workers, unionized workers. They know the importance of having fair salaries, and other unionized workers are aware of this as well. And now, postal workers are going to have to be carrying a double load, a bag on each shoulder, and they're out there delivering the mail, whatever the weather conditions. And how can they be able to work safely on slippery stairs or icy sidewalks when they are carrying these loads? And at the same time, the government wants to reduce their wages and their benefits. In my riding, for example, there were many outdoor stairways that postal workers, that postmen have to climb, and this is a question of safety. Now, the Conservatives don't seem to believe in labor relations, because it is legal for the postal workers to act the way they did with rotating strikes. And the government is trying to limit the activities of an arbitrator as well, because they've already set out rates, and the government is bringing in a law to force workers back to work, but this should be a very final resort, and this is creating a precedent in our labor relations, because it was the government effectively that announced the lockout. So democracy is not just a question of being able to vote in a general election, it's also the right to negotiate, to bargain, the right to association, and they are also, workers also have the right to apply pressure. Now, the government is saying that we don't have respect for citizens, small and medium-sized businesses, but we are very opposed to these anti-democratic measures, and the government should not try to make people believe that the NDP is not there for them. It's important. We must respect workers, the families.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Minister of State for Science and Technology.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to just make two comments.
Order. The Honourable Member from Burnaby, New Westminster, on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, for a while now, we have seen some unacceptable behaviour on the other side of the House, so I would ask you, Mr. Speaker, to please control the Conservative members who are lacking respect towards those who are rising and speaking.
That is not a point of order. I would agree that there has been a lot more noise in the last few minutes, but I have been monitoring the debate in this place. Questions and comments. The Honourable Minister of State for Science and Technology.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I want to just make two comments on the member's speech. One, she mentioned about motorists honking at this strike initiative, and she assumed that the honking was in favor of the strikers. I suspect that it was more likely, Mr. Speaker, small business owners going to work, simply honking at the strikers, saying, "Get the hell out of the way, I want to go to work." The other thing I would like to ask the member is, I have emails from postal workers who tell me they were not allowed to vote by their union. They're disappointed with that, and they're demanding that the union allow them to vote on what they thought was a very good deal. I would like to know from the member, how undemocratic is that?
It's called NDP. That's what it's called.
L'honorable député de la
Honourable
Pointe.
Member for La Pointe de Lille. My answer is that it's not as anti-democratic as the government's approach today in this House. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for her impassioned remarks tonight, and ask her. We keep hearing that the postal workers did not have the chance to vote on subsequent offers, and yet they gave their union a 94.5% mandate to strike. All right. Now the question is, the party opposite keeps insisting that that wasn't enough. My question: does the Conservative Party go to the electorate? Do they have an election every time they introduce a new piece of legislation? Wouldn't that analogy be comparable to the kinds of nonsense that they're spouting about the strike mandate?
L'honorable député.
Honourable Member for La Pointe de Lille. Today, we're here because we want to defend interests of workers against legislation that the government is attempting to have passed. They've tried to fool us and tell us that if we wanted to go and share in our Saint Jean-Baptiste holiday, all we had to do was do that. We just had to leave the house and go. But we're not playing politics. We're here to defend workers, and we're going to stay here until the government agrees to vote on the amendments we are tabling. Questions or comments? The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that the member has set the tone here. I think you'll see that things are going to get a little calmer as I speak now. I'd just like to ask the member if she shares my concern about this situation. I myself have been involved in the union, And there's give and take in any situation. The bill has been tabled by the government, and it's so good for management. It's so supportive of Canada Post that even if there are negotiations ongoing, I think, actually, that management has no interest really in moving things forward for the simple reason that the government has handed them working conditions on a silver platter. Could the member comment on the situation and the problem that I see? The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. I'd like to thank my colleague for that excellent question. I don't think I really need to add anything. The government is the head of this corporation. The corporation would never have implemented a lockout without the government's agreement, and they dare suggest wage increases that are less than that the employer proposed and that are less than the cost of inflation. So obviously there aren't going to be any negotiations. The government says they've tried and they've tried and they've tried, but all they've done is actually give Canada Post the ability to do what it wants. They're setting a precedent. Now all employers, any employers, CBC, Radio-Canada, any employers won't have to renegotiate a collective agreement because they'll know that this government that will be here, unfortunately, for 4 years, will be on their side.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member